So yeah, so I am. Oh, it's like, oh, that's odd. I'm a full stack developer, and as Manish said, went to kickstart coding. It's something where I was always fascinated with computers since I was in like third grade, and I remember my elementary school like got the internet and was like one of the early students like using it. But I also am a writer, and a teacher, an educator, and so it's like sort of is these dual things that have always gone on in my in my life. Uh and so, as you'll notice, some of the titles of these slides will be references to books. So this is the portrait of the developer as a young man. So in high school, I didn't really there was not a lot there, there weren't really access to programming classes. And so, I really became fascinated when I taught myself TI Basic just for the TI-83 calculator to make text-based RPGs and simple graphic-based games, as well as, HTML to build static GeoCity sites that had lots of marquees, going across the top, and pretty much just sharing things about like poetry and anime. But uh, so that's sort of always been at the core. So I guess in terms of like moving towards everything, a thing to sort of remember to just be excited uh, and genuinely interested in, and curious about learning to program like as a creative act. At least that's something that was sort of always at the at the core for me. uh but I ended up studying professional writing and in technology in college, alongside creative writing and a few other things, like rhetoric. But I didn't study computer science. It was something where I incorporated building websites, for local for local businesses and arts organizations. Were definitely part of my studies because there was a service oriented component, but it's not something that I had like specific training in. I did attempt, to learn several programming languages around that time, alongside, studies where it was, Java and C++ mainly, because I was like, I want to make video games, Java applets, but, the way I was attempting to learn, it was, were like outdated books or like online resources that weren't like, they weren't, sort of necessarily the best, or as like, or there weren't as many as there are today. So I kept making static websites, but I gave up on, like programming. Uh, but you know, again, thing to remember there, especially when you're sort of just starting out, is to just be persistent. So, didn't it's like don't let a lack of having the right resources for you, like at the moment, get in the way of what you eventually want to be able to create. And that's one of the reasons that like that core idea of linking it to creation really really comes into play. I mean, it really wasn't until a few years ago that I decided to even really like learn to program again. I built a few simple HTML5 like web apps that use a little bit of JavaScript for writing exercises for students. But that was it. It wasn't. It was just something that was fun to do on the side that sort of ended up being incorporated into roles I had because I liked doing it. Whether that was like building a website for a literary journal or something like that. But it wasn't like this is what I'm necessarily trying to do. And then that wasn't really, like I said, until a few years ago when I was like, well, I enjoy doing this, and uh, you know, again, want to be persistent and keep just working on it. And so I began searching for like online resources, which there are a lot more of like now and even than a few years ago, but there were almost too many options, and I wasn't exactly sure where to begin. There were lots of different starting points, and it wasn't like, oh, I wasn't necessarily like getting it. It was just more so there wasn't a structured environment. And I know that is that's one of the ways that I learn I learn best. And so I started looking for coding boot camps, and eventually was introduced to Kickstart Coding. And so that and that was a great turning point. And so thing to remember, be a planner and keep those objectives in mind and set small goals for yourself before and while learning. So I sort of had this idea of mine of like I want to build full stack web applications, even though I wasn't even sure at that time everything that meant. I knew there were things I wanted to do with web apps that I could not do with the limited knowledge that I had. So began a long quest and journey, which is still not over. Because as an introvert, I'm an INFP, if you're familiar with the MBTI. Boot camps are, while getting guidance and, having other brains to like bounce ideas off of and see what other people are doing and let that like, influence, what you're doing. And again, like that structure so useful because before learning Django, brushed up on and learned some new things about HTML and CSS. Was introduced to Bash and to Git as a part of the curriculum, and as well as it with Python, like writing functions, understanding like loops better, using modules, object-oriented programming principles, and we're building static site generator with Python, and we had learned the Jinja 2 templating system, which was was very similar to the Django template language. And so it made that transition from like, building one thing to the next much smoother. And so a key thing to remember there is just like, again, be a planner, like take it one step at a time. And, a thing that one of the things again, I loved about like that Kickstart coding, curriculum, was just like having that understanding of, HTML and, and CSS and Python before going in, and something where even if, you're doing it on your, your own doing some self-learning, like, make sure with Python to understand those common data types, understand writing functions, as well as writing classes before learning Django, because, and knowing how all of that works. The thing you might want to do is like build a simple static website, a few pages of content, and then learn Django by like, again, converting it into a Django site with like an email form or something. So that was, something that was really, helpful there. So something that, uh, thinking of some particular like pitfalls or something that was difficult for me while while learning Django, was really just understanding models uh, and the whole concept of MPT architecture. It didn't immediately click with me. I was very comfortable like writing functions and views.py and like changing settings, and but for some reason I kept getting stuck. I mean, it really took drawing out copies of charts and visualizations that like I'd seen, like not even just like looking at them, but uh actively drawing them out and looking at a sample example application, and then like you know copying different versions of other working examples of code, and like like being like, okay, that's this on the chart, and spending extra time reading about SQL in order to get a decent grasp of what the ORM was doing, because I think that that was especially during a time where I think I was even like, sort of, behind, or even like I rushed through, and it was the week where I was sort of catching up. And it was like, I, like, it was just like, okay, like I know what is happening. I have this understanding of what's being abstracted, or a better idea of it now. And so, that was a definitely a big point, and a thing that was very humbling was, and a thing that really clicked while you know uh that really made it click, was actually going to just like going to the Django docs. And even though I had, sort of done these other, done some of these other things, it was, even going through that, writing your first Django app tutorial and doing the polls, doing the polls app, because even it allowed me to just like, even though I already understood most of the concepts it covered, it allowed me to just focus on what I was missing. And I think, that's a thing that's key. Like I was, it was thing where I was looking at like really specific things. Like, I mean, I'm sure I was looking at something like making queries or like something that was, sort of specific. And then I'd see like, it being referenced like, this is just like this in SQL. And then I'd be like, but I don't remember exactly, or I don't like know exactly. I don't quite, understand and grasp that yet as, a very early, beginner. And so, like, whoa, what do I, what do I do from here? The second big pitfall for me actually was like determining the setup for, it was my first Django app like after boot camp, because we had spent this whole second course, learning React and building, building MERN apps. And so, and I worked on one of those right after boot camp. And, you know, uh, I knew that there was another project that I wanted to do that, I was like, well, I think Django would actually be great for this, because I know that I wanted to be this larger project. I know that I want multiple, like, I know I want multiple apps that are going to be a part of it. I know that I want to do it like quickly, just, prototype it to get it just done. And so I tried, it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to just go with the, the go with Start app for it. And then I was like, oh, I'll try Cookie Cutter. But Cookie, it was sort of like at that stage, especially since I was just, remembering or, just, sort of coming back to it and was still learning it, really. I and am now, but I was like, wanted something in between. And then I remembered that, Michael, who's actually the founder of Kickstart Coding, who, you know, I mentioned at the beginning, he actually created a Django project starter. And I ended up going with that because it was a good like middle ground between those two, like, in terms of like thinking how I might, scale it later. And yeah, that is, I'll actually, maybe I should click on that now. But it was a good middle ground. And I hadn't actually used it during the boot camp. I'm not sure or remembering why, but it just became a, great middle ground to start out. And so, again, sort of remembering to, be smart, look for ready-made solutions to help you get started and learn, faster. And so, with that, getting that actually like, on Heroku and functional, and I will put the link and actually go back and click on it once on that starter, so we can see what that is. After, but just two more little slides here. But building that, that first project was a big confidence builder. It was definitely an early project, and it's something that I'm like, oh, I want to like jump back in now, just because, after having learned, more, and have a better understanding, and even like having a little bit more experience. It was great for getting like my first like Django contract. And I built a solution for this company, and it was like really it was like digital signal processing with Python. There's a lot of that, and I didn't really know anything about that before, so it was a lot of just like learning it on the fly. And so I was so happy that I had to worry less with about like setting up that, had to worry less about setting up that like framework and having that understanding at least enough of it to get things going. Focus a lot more on just like what I needed to learn in terms of Python. And so again, like, just remember, in terms of being a problem solver, like, frameworks are designed so you worry less about getting a project running and more about developing your unique solutions. And so I think I'm sure Michael or someone I'd read like sort of said that before, but then it really, like, that honestly is the first time it really clicked for me. And
Kevin, do you think we could go over to the QA, or do you have?
oh yeah, yeah. No, I was just
Just
gonna
in the interest of time.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, this is final thing. Yeah, here are 13 minus 7 reasons why Django is a great first framework. Let me actually stop here. Yeah, so many batteries included, great documentation, large developer community, as you can see, and Django 3 just dropped this year. Python's a great first object-oriented programming language, and it's perfect for someone who understands HTML and CSS a little bit and wants to learn a modern, OOP language like Python, and that's beginner friendly.